Good morning. Coming up today on Spotlight, a scholarly, academic, nonpartisan perspective on the Trump impeachment trial. How much is it being guided by what the framers of the U.S. Constitution had in mind when they wrote it centuries ago? We'll ask Wayne State University law professor Kirsten Matoy Carlson. And later in our Sunday morning program, meet Kevin Williams, the new president and CEO of Detroit-based Global Automotive Alliance Manufacturing and Supply Chain Management. A mouthful. It's Sunday, January the 26th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Professor, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Certainly a very eventful week in Washington, D.C. I think what a lot of people are wondering right now when they sit here and, this little small book, the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, looking at an impeachment trial, but they're looking at it through the prism of a very partisan arena. People will say what the framers of the Constitution wrote centuries ago, is it still applicable to what we see happening today in our current form of government?
Of course it is. I mean, if you think about what the framers were doing when they wrote those impeachment clauses, what they were concerned about was abuses of power and misconduct of the executive branch. If we put ourselves in their position, think about who they were and what they had just experienced. They had just fought a war to get their independence from a sovereign who they felt was a despot. And so they were so concerned about executive power and the growth of executive power that they wanted to protect the country and the people from abuses of power, which is why those provisions are in there. I mean, think about it. When they first wrote the Articles of Confederation, which was the first document that governed our country, they didn't even have an executive. They were so concerned about a monarchy taking over our country.
Having just witnessed a system with a king.
Just totally experienced it, right? And one of the things they were really worried about at the time was foreign influence.
What we see now is truly a battle and a balance of power. Each branch of government feeling as though they are co-equal to the other branch of government. This is now before the Senate. The senators are the jurors. What is their role and how seriously should they be taking this role?
They should be taking this role extremely seriously. Their role, not only in an impeachment trial, but as members of Congress under our Constitution, is to exercise oversight over the executive branch. So they have this larger role in which what they're supposed to do is keep the executive branch in check. Impeachment was meant to actually check the presidency when the Congress was concerned that he was either failing to uphold his duties or he was exercising powers beyond what he was supposed to do under the Constitution. And so they should take this very seriously. They should be listening. They should want all of the evidence, first of all, to see if there really is an abuse of power here.
But they say you have some already arguing that all the evidence is there and there's no need for witnesses, and not to confuse this with a judicial trial in which you start with the evidence, you have the witnesses, you make the closing arguments, the jurors make their decision.
Well, the procedures are different, and you're absolutely correct. It is not exactly identical to a criminal trial or a judicial proceeding, and that's because it's a different thing. What impeachment is meant to do, it is meant to check the executive branch. It's not meant to try the president for a crime. In fact, the founders envisioned that if a high-level official, so a judge or a senator or someone, had committed a crime, that the criminal process would take care of that. That's why they gave impeachment to the Senate and not the Supreme Court. The outcome of an impeachment, the prescribed remedy is removal from office. It's not a term of imprisonment, and that's because they are not actually having a criminal proceeding where they're trying the president.
So give clarification, because we have heard this argument on both sides of the fence, that you can be impeached without committing what we view as a crime in a court of law. Correct or incorrect?
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. They are two totally separate things.
But in a highly partisan atmosphere, would it help to have been charged with some sort of a crime? Or would that be in violation somewhat of the impeachment process in the Constitution?
It is not necessary, and it's not what the founders envisioned. What they really wanted impeachment to be about was checking executive power.
Right.
And there are things that can be beyond executive power or a failure to exercise power when you're supposed to under your constitutional duties that wouldn't necessarily be a crime.
All right, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, I want to talk about how subpoenas do or do not play into this proceeding. We'll be right back with Professor Carlson. Stay with us. Subpoenas. Heard a whole lot about that, particularly the House managers wanting to subpoena different people. And if they come before, if they get their wish, then you can always say, I'm exercising executive privilege. Talk about this battle. Matter of fact, you're on your way to Washington to deal with this question
talk about this battle.
Yeah.
So subpoenas are one of the tools that Congress has to investigate the executive branch and make sure that it's accountable and transparent and that it is enforcing the laws the way that it's supposed to. They're somewhat akin to a court subpoena, except when you get a congressional subpoena, you are expected to show up and testify before a congressional body, usually a hearing, but in this case, of course, it would be the entire Senate. There are a number of grounds upon which witnesses can resist a subpoena. The one that we've heard about and that's getting all the attention right now is executive privilege.
Correct.
And there are actually a number of
and that's being done to help protect, not in a bad way, protect the executive branch, the President of the United States, who said, many of the things I do are not necessarily things that the world needs to know.
Well, the idea behind executive privilege is twofold, right? Part of it is exactly what you've said, which is there are some things that the president does that everybody doesn't need to know. So a lot of that goes to like national security concerns. But there's a second side of it, which is that there is a concern that is similar to any kind of privilege, which is that the president can't get good, candid advice if there's a concern that the people giving him the advice can be called to testify and have to reveal all of that information, right? I mean, there are things that we all say in private conversations with people that we're close to, our confidants, that we might not want the whole world to know.
I think we've all been guilty of that, absolutely.
And we might not get that advice if it's open to the whole world. So there are two kind of reasons why there's executive privilege. Now, there's also limits to executive privilege. The Supreme Court made clear in the Nixon case that it's not absolute, that there are limits on when a president can exert executive privilege. And the courts have really tried to stay out of it. They've suggested that these are interbranch disputes between the executive and Congress, and that they should really negotiate and come up with an accommodation.
Right.
And
just because you're subpoenaed, if you get to that point, and Bolton and others are subpoenaed, doesn't mean that you have to come in and say everything you know, correct?
Right. And in fact, what the courts have said, both in the Myers case and in the McGahn case, which is currently before the Second Circuit, is that the problem with what the Trump administration has done is they've tried to do this absolute immunity. That, you know, Trump has been on the media several times saying, I'm not going to answer any of these subpoenas. We are not handing anything over. And that's a new position. We haven't seen a position claiming that kind of executive power in a long time. Normally what happens is Congress, actually what happens is there's an informal process where they contact people that they want to come in and serve as witnesses. And if they can't reach a negotiation at that point, only then do they subpoena them. And then once they do the subpoena, normally there's more negotiations trying to come up with an accommodation. But President Trump has said, I'm not negotiating, I'm not accommodating, I'm going to fight every single subpoena. And that's what's unusual here.
And that's what's being challenged on constitutional grounds.
That's what's being challenged, and that's why there are a number of cases dealing with congressional subpoenas in the courts right now.
Should the American people be watching this intently and be very concerned about the impact that it's going to have on our current government and future government? Or has this become so political that they have a right to be tuned out on this and say, we already know the outcome before, and this is an exercise in futility because it has been made pretty clear that the Republicans are sticking together, the Democrats are sticking together?
The American people should be really concerned. And they should be concerned because there are issues about governmental accountability, about separation of powers, about transparency, and about abuse of power by the executive here. I mean, the charges against the president go to the very heart of our democratic system. They go to whether we actually have free and fair elections in this country. And if we believe in having a constitutional democracy and having that democracy persist, we should be really concerned. Now, that's not to say that there's a clear answer here. It's to say that what we should want is we should want elected representatives who are carrying out their constitutional duties. And if there is a substantial part of our elected officials, regardless of party, who think that there could be misconduct or abuse of power, then they have a duty under our Constitution to investigate that.
Quick final question. As a law professor teaching in a law school with bright young legal minds trying to get their law degree and challenging you, I'm sure, in classroom, how exciting of a time is this for you as the professor and for them as students?
It's a tremendously exciting time. I mean, most of my students have never experienced an impeachment proceeding before. They don't remember the Clinton impeachment, which was 21 years ago. And so this is new ground for them. And this is a moment to really educate the public about what impeachment is about, why the founders put it in the Constitution, how it's supposed to serve a wide range of purposes related to making sure that our government functions the way it's supposed to, that there's checks on the different powers that are exercised by the different branches of government. So for me, it's a great educational opportunity to help educate them. It's also a time of robust debate, right? People have different views on whether there should be witnesses and whether the articles of impeachment are fair, whether the process is fair. So it's a great time to have discussions about our Constitution and our democracy and what we want it to look like in the future.
Professor Carlson, thanks so much for coming in and helping to shed some academic light on this very interesting procedure that we're all watching across the country. And I'm sure we're going to want to get you back because I think this is not going to be over quickly. And we'll be back in just a little bit and we'll sit down with Kevin Williams. He is the new president and CEO of Global Automotive Alliance. We hope you stay with us. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you, Chuck.
31 years, or about 31 years with General Motors, crisscrossing the globe on behalf of that large automaker. Now you've decided to take another step and come over to GAA, a company that started many years ago, Bill Picard, and has now diversified quite a bit. What made you make that jump?
Well, simply my desire to make sure that I was contributing. I, as you said, spent 31 years with General Motors all over the world and built a lot of skills and abilities. And quite frankly, getting to know Global Automotive Alliance, GAA, through Bill Picard, one of the great great leaders in our industry.
No doubt about it.
Had
Very
a long
successful
relation-
entrepreneur.
Yeah, had a long relationship with Bill and his team from my work at GM when I ran supplier development worldwide, and certainly at a time when we need African American businesses to grow. Bill gave me a call and just asked if I would consider coming over and help him. I tell people I said no 3 times, but none of the no's worked.
Well, it worked. What did you learn most at General Motors that you think will help you in your new position with GAA?
Well, you know, obviously I had a very extensive career at General Motors. I worked at every level of the company worldwide. I ran some of the biggest businesses for GM. GM Canada, for instance, was a $38 billion business, which I ran for my last 5 years of time at GM. And had the opportunity to retire at 50 years old, and went back to Nashville, Tennessee, started a real estate company.
You realized you were too young to put your feet up.
Realized I was too young to put my feet up, and when this opportunity came along to come into the company and to help to rebuild it to what we want it to be, exciting opportunity, so I jumped in.
Let's take a step back. If Bill Picard were sitting across from me, Dr. Bill Picard, he would be telling the stories about when he started all of this and during the 50s, 60s, 70s, kind of the heyday, and Detroit being a mecca for African American businesses in manufacturing to a large extent because of the automotive industry and being able to launch their supplier firms on down the line. He has taken that company and has really made it grow with the help of Sylvester Hester and so many other people, and now they brought you on board. How much has that changed? How much has Detroit changed? Is this still a mecca for automotive businesses and manufacturing in African Americans?
Yeah, I would say that the African American supply base is in good stead. As the automotive companies are still growing, there's still tremendous opportunity for African American companies to play not just a trivial role, but a vital role in supplying goods and services through to the bigger tiers in the tiered base of manufacturing companies that exist here in the United States and globally.
Merging and diversifying have become 2 key words if you want to continue to survive. Talk a little bit about GAA and what that company has up under it, because you have several companies up under it.
Yeah, certainly. GAA is a company made up of various different types of companies. There's actually 6 companies on the brand of Global Automotive Alliance. We are in the light manufacturing, what we call a 3PL, a logistics provider as well, and that's a provider that provides warehousing, distribution, and those types of systems to the automotive and other types of industries across the country. So we not only do the logistics, we are also in light manufacturing spaces across a variety of different types of industries, from airlines with a company like Boeing Airlines to diesel engines to Mercedes-Benz in Alabama. We have a very, very unique platform and skill capability to do not just logistics and warehousing as a part of a 3PL, which is a logistics provider, but also the manufacturing side that we have tremendous skills in doing.
Okay, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, I want to have you drill down on where you want to take GAA during your tenure as CEO. We'll be right back with Kevin Williams, President and CEO of GAA. Stay with us. Where do you want to take the company?
Well, we've sat and really thought strategically about what this company's capability is. And the reason why I believe I was hired is because I have some expertise in strategically framing and developing and growing companies, much like I did at General Motors Corporation when I ran GM of Mexico or GM of Canada, or when I ran our global parts and service business. It's all about how do you get it to scale and to make it the best that it can be. And that's why I'm here at Global Automotive Alliance. My goal, my direction is to take this company from out of the realm of small manufacturing operations to a significant player in the industry long term.
Yeah. The biggest challenge?
Well, the biggest challenge that we have now, and then we're seeing it here in the United States, particularly in the South, is when you have zero unemployment in places like Alabama, retaining the kind of skill set in the organization from people that work inside of our operations and the ability to keep them in the operations. And what's happening, and when there's zero unemployment, there's a lot of job hopping. So we have significant challenges with making sure we got the right people every day. Now that's an industry challenge and not just a GAA challenge. The other big issue that inside the company that we're solving for is how fast and how significant are we going to grow the scale, and ensuring that we have the ability to attract the talent to get us from where we are today as a significant 3PL company to a much more significant company going forward.
You were educated in Nashville at Tennessee State University, one of the HBCUs, then went on to get higher education degrees at Central Michigan University. I know that you still involved with Tennessee State. You have key people in your operation: Carl Bell, strong Morehouse background, Bill Picard, who teaches and lectures all over the place, but particularly has affection for trying to do it at historically black colleges and universities. When you're talking to these young students about what's coming tomorrow, what is it you are saying to them, and what are you telling them the opportunities are?
Well, everything starts with one word that defines what I believe my life has been all about, and that word is excellence. So when I go have the opportunity, and I spend a lot of time talking to young people at universities across the country, I talk about the standards of excellence needed to be able to perform at high levels. I always get the question, how did you get from an entry level at Flint, Michigan, at Buick Motor Division at General Motors, and how did you become the CEO of Canada or Mexico or some of the other things that I've done? And I always tell them that it's about one thing: excellence. And then I ask them, and then I tell them to ask themselves, why excellence? And it's always excellence because I'm capable. And that was my motto, not just for me, but for my entire family. The things that I tell my daughter and everyone around me is, you got to be the best at what you do in order to get to the highest potential that you deserve.
Glad to have you on
Thanks,
board
Chuck.
there. Best of luck to you and to the company, and we'll get you back for sure.
Thank you so much.
All right. Special thanks to my guest today. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.